Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic, hoping you're doing well, and today we're doing a box office breakdown for this past weekend. That's right, the Labor Day weekend, which is looking at a current domestic box office total for every movie combined together for this weekend, at least for the 3-day weekend, to be roughly $50 million in total, maybe a little bit more, maybe, and more likely, a little bit less, which is one of the worst weekends that we've seen in the summer of 2025. As you all know, I am a person of, who is a teacher, and so whenever I hear people say, oh, it's still summertime, yeah, maybe the season of summer is still here, but as far as summer, like how we actually all understand summer to be, yeah, I'm sorry, summer ended back when school started for most people, or for at least for a large chunk of people, back towards the beginning of August, and it's looking like the box office is basically reflecting that very fact, because, again, not only is it one of the worst box office weekends of the entire summer of 2025, not only is it one of the worst weekends of the entire year 2025, but also, it's a holiday weekend. And I know that, of course, you're going to have a bunch of people out there, especially in the mainstream media, especially those trades that love to run cover for the Hollywood studios, who are trying to make the argument that, well, Labor Day is always known for being the slower of the weekends. This is pretty normal for the numbers to not be all that impressive. But then all I have to do is bring up things like, oh, this is kind of how, I always say, January is the month where films go to die. And yet even I will admit that, guess what? You can still have major releases that come out that end up surprising you. You can still have good movies that come out in January and end up running away with it. Just ask Megan from a few years ago. Now, of course, they have since made a lot of mistakes and misread what that audience was really wanting with the release of Megan 2 just a couple years after that first movie. But the first film still shows you, right, that it's not the weekend that is the reason why a box office is not known to be very strong. And it's not because of it just being called Labor Day. It's rather, it's an active choice clearly being made by studios to not release major films or films that they at least think could possibly be successful. And so all that we're left with then are a series of weekends, and going back into history of the Labor Day weekend cycle, that are just, again, not all that impressive. But again, it's not because of Labor Day, it's because of the studios making these choices, and all this does still, right? Even though they are not releasing anything majorly new this weekend, it still shows you the same problem as it would if they did have a major release this weekend, because we've already been seeing it for the last several weeks at the box office, including over the entirety of the summer. And that is that Hollywood is on the rocks, as the good friends over at Film Threat always like to say, because they are out of ideas, and their ideas are either not good or not being well received, and are just blatantly being ignored by a large portion of the audience. And so we'll go ahead and talk about these things. Also, some of the two big stories, not only is just how atrocious the entire weekend is, and really especially for the Hollywood studio system itself, with some of the worst numbers that we've seen, and it's also a very sad story for theaters, because the theaters themselves, of course, are struggling through this, having a holiday frame where they should be having a bunch of people coming to their theater. That's just not happening in any realistic way. Instead, right, they are stuck with this. So that's, of course, one of the big stories, is just the lack of box office currently going on right now this weekend. But then you also have got two new releases that are both coming in underneath a film from 50 years ago. That's right, a film from 1975, a little film called Jaws, right, which is now celebrating its 50th anniversary. That's right, that film came in the number 2 spot this weekend. Again, obviously, that's very, very strong for Jaws. It's very much a huge sign of just how popular Jaws still continues to be. But $8.1 million beats out the two new releases, Caught Stealing, which is the new Darren Aronofsky film from Sony, $7.8 million for that movie, and then also the new comedy from Searchlight with a bunch of British actors called The Roses, making only $6.3 million. So Jaws, a 50-year-old movie, coming in the number 2 box office spot. Weapons, a film from 4 weeks ago, still taking the number 1 spot at the box office. And all of the films that should be holding much better than what they actually are not even in the top 5. Right, a movie like Fantastic Four, for instance, right, from Marvel, 6 weeks out from initial release, should be doing much better than it currently is. There's always that talk about Superman as well, right? If it was really doing as well as people have been trying to continue to make the argument that the film is somehow doing, also not really in that discussion. You add on top of that the other major story, which is that Superman is now behind F1, a film from 10 weeks ago, because of a massive global presence for that movie. Whereas the majority of Superman's box office has been coming primarily from the domestic audience here. just yet another story, another piece of evidence to add to the fact that, yeah, Superman's box office is not as impressive as some people are really trying to make it out to be. And so let's just go ahead and dive into these numbers. Again, a lot of different stories and things going on for a very slow weekend. This is the kind of stuff that we just kind of have to talk about, right? Because, again, when you have a film like Jaws coming out, beating new releases, again, I love Jaws. Jaws is fantastic. That's great news for it, but it's also a really bad news and a bad look for Hollywood, where they can't even beat a film from 50 years ago. It says a lot about the current quality and content coming out from modern Hollywood, and also the fact that F1 has now passed up and is likely going to continue to expand its separation from the release of Superman is also, again, something else that is being talked about and needs to be talked about. So, of course, we got Weapons coming in the number one spot with $10.2 million, dropping only 34%. So we're seeing a lot of strong holds this weekend because it is a holiday weekend. So even though they're going to, on the one hand, say, well, Hollywood, this is a very weak holiday weekend, and so that's why there's very slow box office. It's still a holiday weekend, and so you're still seeing the same type of holiday holds that you tend to see because more people are being able to see movies and have that holiday mindset. Where they're maybe more likely to go see a movie, or at least to see what is new at the theater. The number two film, as I mentioned, right, is Jaws, which, I love how the numbers puts their weekends here, right, which came out 2,620 weekends ago, back in 1975, and yeah, ended up making $8.1 million. So again, very impressive numbers there for Jaws. Number three film came in with Caught Stealing, rather. Number three film was Caught Stealing from Sony Pictures, the new Darren Aronofsky film, $7.8 million. Pretty bad per theater ratio there, considering it is a new release. Freaker Friday from Walt Disney continuing to hold well, 27% drop there, dropping only 200 screens. So this is, again, a film that is definitely towards the brighter side of the story when it comes to Disney. We'll look at, whether or not it's reached profitability yet or how close it is to doing that, because it's one of the only positive stories going on for Disney, it seems, this year, other than the obvious Lilo and Stitch, for instance. The Roses from Searchlight, this is the new British comedy, $6.3 million. Again, just not very impressive numbers here. It's a comedy. Then you got Fantastic Four at $4.8 million, 20% hold. Bad Guys 2 at 7% hold. Very strong number there as far as holds are concerned, but again, just not going to get anywhere close to the original movie. Superman, 24% hold. Again, people are going to look at that and say, well, it's still making $2.5 million after 8 weeks. That's impressive, right? Again, the issue is that the movie is just not performing as well as people are trying to make it out to be. If we were talking about a film that cost only $100 million to make, this would be a very, very different discussion. But instead, by their own admission, or at least by the reports of the trades, which most people are trying to claim is gospel, the film cost $225 million at least, not to mention your typical marketing spend. And again, I'm not talking here about, you can't count for the marketing to be things like the different ad deals and the different sponsorships and things like that, right? Because they might list that as spending and such, but it really can't be viewed that way. It's like, no, I'm just talking about your general spend on any movie. Just taking the bare minimum of anything, this movie still has not broken even. This film is still $40 million in the red. And guess what? Based off of its current tracking, it's going to end its theatrical run in the red. Now, I've mentioned before, it's going to make money back on VOD sales and physical media sales, but you don't want to have a film that is this is a huge hit, this is a huge success, we're so proud of this movie, to be a film that ends in the red, as is the current state of this film. Right? Even a movie like F1, which is currently beating Superman, even that movie is still ending in the red. Now, as I've mentioned previously, right, that is going to be something that probably both studios involved, both the distributor in Warner Brothers and the producer Apple, again, amongst a couple other producers, are going to look at that in very different ways because Apple sold the distribution rights to Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers, of course, is getting some money back on that. And so you're going to see both of them probably come out of that, financially happy, especially since it's done so well down the stretch, done so much better down the stretch compared to its opening weekend and the first couple weekends, even in fact, too. But even there, right, you don't want to have a film ending in the red in even that case either. Right? I'm not going to give that film an excuse either. But at the very least, there is a good verifiable reason to explain why those studios are probably a lot happier than Warner Brothers, even though Warner Brothers might be trying to pretend like they are somehow happy with these overall numbers. No Bite 2, 51% drop. This is, again, atrocious numbers all the way around. Right, that film dropped over 50% last week. I think it was like 60% drop last weekend. So these are just really, really bad numbers. Again, over holiday frame, this is the kind of number you don't want to see, right? If films that have been out for a long time are still holding very, very strong, like you would expect to see similar drop-offs for these movies too. You're just not seeing that. So Nobody 2 dropping off like a cliff. And then also The Naked Gun dropping 40% there, dropping also over 1,000 screens for Paramount. Really not all that surprising there either. The one last thing I'd mention there is the number 11 spot, which was another new film. This was a limited release, though, The Toxic Avenger Unrated from Iconic Cineverse. So 1.7 million. Again, not all that impressive numbers there. But for anyone who was wondering, I just wanted to mention it. Weapons is now at $232 million globally. This is, again, very, very impressive numbers. A reported production budget of $38 million. It's made 6.1 times its budget. So this is the reason why we're talking about a very, very different story when it comes to a film like Weapons than for a film like Superman or even like Freakier Friday, right? When we're talking about making money, when we're talking about profits, when we're talking about just break evens in general, right? That is a huge factor, especially in today's market where you need to make closer to 3 times your budget to break even, right? To have a very clear victory with 6.1 times, like more than double your break even, that is a very, very strong statement and a very, very good sign for the people behind the film as well. Yeah, that's right. 1975's Jaws does also need to be mentioned, right? Now, this is a movie, of course, it's going to have money spanning from the last 50 years or so. So again, the fact that this film is now back in the discussion just shows you how weak the next couple of films are, right? So Caught Stealing made $13.2 million. This film cost a roughly $40 million net spend. Yeah, making $13 million globally in your total, that's awful. That's atrocious, right? $120 million is the rough break-even point, right? Somewhere between $100 and $120 million, and this film just ain't going to reach that point. So very, very bad for that film going forward, and yet another box office flop in 2025 for Hollywood. Freakier Friday continuing to hold, again, $130 million globally, better than anyone could have expected. It's still not going to match, though, the original film, the success of the original remake of the original film, I should say, right? This film, though, has made 3.1 times its budget, so again, based off of that, looks like profitability is absolutely on the table. But as you all know, it's not always an exact science when it comes to that break-even multiplier, because it all comes down to how much is it making domestically, how much is it making internationally, and where. And that's why I do my running tally in my chart, because then we're not having to worry about the 2.5 or 3 times multiplier, because we can just see the raw data as far as, okay, is this a net gain or is this a net loss? The Rose is at $15.5 million. Again, a bunch of British actors in it, a couple of American actors in it too. Not really my favorite group of people. Some I like, some I really don't like. You have, of course, the Doctor, or quote, the Doctor, the most recent Doctor in this movie too. $15.5 million. This film, we don't know the official budget. The estimates are between $40 and $60 million. Not very good for this movie either. Fantastic Four: First Steps, $505 million. Oh man, it crossed $500 million, guys, so it must be a success. As we all know, this film cost a minimum of what they have reported, $200 million. We all know that that number is probably a bunch of bogus, right? A bunch of bunk, we could say, because Disney always underreports their numbers, right? The trades always put out and float out these numbers that are clearly inaccurate. So once we get those official UK tax filings, we'll know exactly how much was spent, net spend on this movie before even marketing is considered. So this film still continuing to be a massive failure. Bad Guys 2, not reaching the success of the first film, which made $250 million back from just a few years ago. Again, doing better down the stretch, but overall still just not quite reaching it. My guess is that their metric is going to be of success is going to be probably a little bit different. It's probably going to be based off of VOD sales, etc., because the budget ultimately was not all that high. Superman, $610 million at the global box office. Again, seems like it would be a huge success if the budget was more manageable, but we all know the budget was actually a lot higher. We can say, oh, well, they didn't spend nearly as much as Marvel would have. Yes, that could be true, right? Multiple things can be true at the same time. And this film is clearly a much bigger success than anything Marvel has put out this year. That also can be true. The fact still remains, the numbers are what they are. And also the fact that F1 the movie, that's right, from 10 weeks ago, right, from like the heart of summer 2025, going up against, right, a film from July of 2025 in Superman, right, now up $3 million up against Superman. For a film about F1 racing, and again, I know we can talk about how this is clearly an international victory. You could argue about F1 racing being more popular, but again, that argument doesn't really hold much water either, because what we can all, I think, agree with is that the reason why this film specifically is doing as well as it is because it's a universally acclaimed movie. Is a film that most people say is good, that most people are saying is worth going to see in theaters. Because if it was all about being an F1 movie or featuring F1 racing and the popularity of that, you would have to also go back in time and say, okay, so that also must be why a film like Ford v Ferrari did as well. Oh wait, Ford v Ferrari wasn't this huge, massive hit in the same way. So we have to, again, kind of keep in mind that just because you're featuring certain characters or featuring certain IPs, that's automatically the reason why it's doing well. Again, I think that you could say that there's definitely an argument to be made that that's why it's doing better internationally than domestically, because it is something that's much more of an interesting topic to an international audience. But the reason why it's doing as well as it is because, again, it is just on paper a much better film than Superman. And again, the numbers are very clear here, especially those holds and how well it's been doing down the stretch. And the fact that by the end of its run, this film is going to end with quite a bit more than Superman. So again, these are, I think, numbers that need to be paid attention to. And I'm sure all the excuses are going to continue to come out for the Superman movie. But fact is, everything that happens every weekend, it seems, we get more and more context as to just how, not saying it's a massive flop in Superman. Some people might be saying that out there. Again, until we actually get some revisions in budgeting, right? Until like some official reporting comes out on that, all we can go with is with the numbers that they themselves have put forward. And even though we can suggest that those numbers are probably on the lower side of things, even just using the numbers that they've given us, the film still has not broken even theatrically. Again, VOD sales, they get a percentage of that back. I imagine that the VOD sales have probably been pretty good for that movie. But even those, I think I've been also hearing that it has not been nearly as successful on VOD as some people thought that it was going to be. Anyway, let's go over to the charts because we love charts here on OMB Reviews. Again, we do have those two new movies, Caught Stealing and The Roses, right now $53 million in the red each. This is just assuming that The Roses cost $40 million. Again, we don't know the official budget yet, but the range is between 40 and 60, according to some reporting. Caught Stealing did cost around $40 million. Again, that is something that has been reported. As this film currently around $53 million in the red because of typical marketing costs. And so these are both movies that are not going to make their money back. Can't we really say that we're all that surprised. Nobody 2 continuing to drop off a cliff. $35 million in total, $20 million in the red. Man, maybe it makes something back VOD-wise, but it's just not looking very good for this movie right now. Weapons, $55 million in net gain profits. Massive hit, massive success for them. And even though next weekend is likely to be owned by The Conjuring Last Rites, it might be interesting to see what the number 2 spot next weekend goes to, because if Weapons continues to hold as well as it is, we could actually see a horror kind of owning of the box office, with Conjuring coming in the number 1 spot, maybe Weapons in the number 2 or number 3 spot, depending on what else comes out and how well things hold. But again, massive win every weekend, every day. Weapons is just adding to its net profits right now. $55 million in net profits based off of the budget. Freaky Friday officially has now made its money back, $1.4 million in net profits. So kudos to Disney for having at least one film, we can say, made some money back. Sketch is basically the same as it was last time. Bad Guys, still $38 million in the red. Again, more than doubled what its box office was after the first 2 weekends. And so overall, that's a very good stretch, right? Shows very, very good legs down the line. But the budget still being, again, not the highest in the world, but high enough to where maybe VOD sales account for something, but still theatrically a box office flop. Naked Gun, $17 million in the red. Again, not the worst number in the world, but also not a positive number. Fantastic Four, $128 million in the red. According to the numbers that they've given us, this film will likely, more realistically, $200 million in the red. Smurfs, actually, I Know What You Did Last Summer, $3.1 million in the black, right? So this actually made its money back. Has not been making too much money, but again, every little bit it makes adds to its profits. Smurfs, they're still $36 million in the red. Eddington, $31 million in the red. James Gunn Superman, still $41 million in the red. Again, those are just the numbers that they've given us. This is not including any extra marketing that likely was a part of the discussion. This is not including anything else, right? This is just including the theatrical release. And even if that is something that you take issue with, look at its first 2 weeks compared, right? 66%. That's a little above the average, okay? And typically in this one, to have really good legs, you want to be below the average, right? When you have a film like The Bad Guys, more than doubling its box office after 2 weekends, that shows us, okay, that film had good legs down the stretch. This film, though, right now is in the same discussion as a film like Eddington, is not even as good holding-wise from its first 2 weeks as a film like Smurfs. I mean, this is, again, a film that people are trying to say is like the best thing ever and is the most successful thing ever. That's what I'm taking issue with. It's not people saying, oh, the film is a bigger success than this movie or anything like that. It's the people who are trying to run with this fake narrative that just does not actually hold up to scrutiny, that this film is a success in really any way. And there's just nothing really to point to that very fact. Jurassic World Rebirth, right? $112 million in net profits, right? So those numbers overall, too, show you most of that budget, most of that box office did come from the first 2 weekends. The big difference is that based on their reported numbers, they actually have made their money back. F1, $102 million in the red. Again, we are still going to be very clear that this is coming out a theatrical loss. But because of that deal between Warner Brothers and Apple, they're likely both coming out on the positive side of things. More than doubled its box office over the past, compared to its first 2 weekends. That's, again, very impressive of stuff. And those are really the only films that had any major updates this weekend. So let me know your thoughts about this. A very slow Labor Day weekend, but some pretty interesting stories nonetheless. And so let me know your thoughts about these things I've mentioned, or did you see Caught Stealing or The Roses, the two new films from this weekend? Did you go see Jaws in the big screen once again? Let me know your thoughts about these things and anything else I mentioned in the comment section down below. If you like this video, make sure that you smash that like button, smash the rumble button as well. You guys are all amazing and beautiful. Have a wonderful rest of your day, a blessed Sunday. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my people on Patreon, Father Luca Illich and Miss Martin Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Martin Muses. Also to my Subscribestar people, Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Matt317. And lastly to my YouTube member, Mr. Roy. Shout out to you, good sir. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, check out the top link in the video description below where you get access to that. Also, you get access to a plethora of other things. You get your name listed at the end of every live stream and video, like you saw in those names that came up before this video started. And also access to a giveaways channel that I host over on the Discord server where I give away 4Ks, Steelbooks, Blu-rays, all kinds of stuff. So check that out if you're interested in that. Also, I have an exclusive podcast that I hold at least once a month, and it's always a good time, and you get extra bonus content with that also. So if any of that sounds interesting, again, check out that top link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.